Karma doesn't apply to thieves, murderers, and traitors in power. There is no karma for them.
Those people who, in his perception, are doing wrong are in fact not doing right. He just doesn't see that rightness.
Why does our crazy government bear no responsibility for the destruction of the country? For anti-people laws?
All power is from the Creator. This is all inevitable.
Incredible solar activity is expected, which could affect Earth. Significantly reduce the Earth's population.
The flares will intensify, and their frequency and density will increase. This is one flare that has passed, but this one will be bigger.
God is infinite. The removal of the ego. No sacred scripture says that God is good, but it does say that he is loving. He loves you like a farmer loves his livestock, which he feeds. A person's fate is written in the book of life in such a way that a person suffers, radiating ego. A person is unable to change their fate. They ask God for help. A person is unable to change their fate. Asking God for help, but everything comes with a price, and not everyone will like the cost. Do you agree with that?
I agree that there is a group of people who have chosen such an interaction with the Creator. The Creator is multifaceted. A group of people who have chosen such an interaction with the Creator. The Creator is multifaceted, and if a person for some reason chooses this particular way of interacting, it is valid. But there are other ways to interact. For example, a huge number of Vedic texts, the Puranas, the Vedas, the Bhagavatam contain a different approach, a different side of the Creator. They show the Creator as a creator, and there, the Creator is shown from the perspective that each of us is a creator. There is such a thing. The mantra, you could say, is Arhar Mahadev, meaning each of us is Mahadev. Mahadev, if translated into understandable language, it is something like God is God, Supreme God, the most important God. Each of us is the most important, and such a facet exists. And with this facet, you can also live, you can also interact. This, actually, what I liked, the path that I chose for myself. So, I'm not looking for God in a painting. I'm not looking for God in a statue. I'm looking for God within myself. I find Him, and we interact, and I keep uncovering more and more the spectrum of our perception of the world. I see that each of us can move in this way. God provides diversity. God offers many opportunities for understanding. It all depends on how much a person allows themselves to free their perception, to expand their perception. The more a person expands their perception, the more they see these facets. And then the question arises, you have free will. Which of these facets will you choose? Do you want to choose for yourself? No problem. If you can hold all the facets in your perception and your actions at the same time, go ahead. Do you want to suffer? Suffer. Do you want to love? Love. Do you want to be happy? Be happy. No problems at all. The mechanism here is actually quite primitive. Here I am. I constantly pay attention to these processes. But even those people who practice with me don't allow themselves to let all of this happen right away. Some people get it in a month, some in 6 months. We finally understood what you were talking about. I say, yeah, okay, seriously, what was I talking about? I'm just joking about that, of course. But it's a very beautiful moment. When a person suddenly realizes that their picture of the world is not complete, and so by expanding your perception, through practices, for example, this picture of the world can be endlessly enriched. And when it seems to you that you've already grasped everything, all the facets, suddenly it turns out that you can still add more facets. As you already want, as you manage your freedom, it's a long journey, and it doesn't end with the life of the physical body. So, on one hand, yes, I can agree with that, but that's far from everything we're given.
So the commentator's opinion is just his own choice.
Yes, it's his choice to live in that paradigm. But that's not the only paradigm that exists.
One of the viewers writes, "The Earth is a heavy planet with gravity, with bad karma. The world of predators where everyone is eating each other. The brightest, purest comes from the sky, and then it returns to the sky. And everything else is Maya."
If we look at it from the perspective of Maya, not Maya, everything here is Maya. Everything here is an illusion, everything here is cartoons. So, if a person is going, in this concept, where somewhere out there it's not a cartoon, but here it is a cartoon. Yes, no, it's all a cartoon, but we are just the same characters in this cartoon, who are completely subject to the influence of the laws, the orders, and the rules that exist in this cartoon. And we have internally signed up for these rules, agreed to them, The other thing is that these are just the starting conditions. And moving through practices, moving through the expansion of your consciousness. By increasing your energetic power, everything gets adjusted. And you can step out from under these rules and frameworks. The other thing is, then the question arises, where to run to? Where is the real one? Yeah, nowhere is real, because initially, this is pure perception. It can't have a form as long as we have a form. We will be in the cartoon. Here's a cartoon about how we live here and suffer, and everything is bad. Then there's a cartoon about how we die and we end up in some other state. And while a person watches these cartoons, he can very sincerely and very confidently say that this is the only thing that exists. Then he will see something new, but he will say, aha, no, now this is definitely the only thing that exists. And then he will see something new again. This is evolution. This is development. If a person is moving in the evolutionary process, and in the end, I reach these states through practices. So I haven't lived to those states yet for them to happen naturally, but I reach them through the techniques that I'm showing. And there is just pure perception. There are no more forms there. And this perception, it's not images. It's very hard to explain in words. But when you see, you realize, but at the same time, it's not like through the eyes. So you don't see this 3D world. You don't see the familiar images and pictures, but at the same time, you see everything all at once. Energy dance isn't just energy dancing around, but something moving. And this dance of energy isn't like, oh, the energy is just dancing around, but more like something that is moving, being you. And so having entered this state, well, it becomes obvious. There is simply something absolutely incomprehensible that is watching, and you are this absolutely incomprehensible something that is watching. And what he looks at, the better he focuses his attention, the more the cartoon becomes, the more familiar forms there are. So if we take our planet, gravity, all of that, then yes, right now it's the Kali Yuga. Yes, right now, in order to sow, you need to kill. And it doesn't really matter globally who you kill, whether it's animals or plants. And globally, it really doesn't matter. Who are you killing? There, for example, animals or plants. Plants also want to live. They are beautifully aware. You can interact with plants on energetic levels. They are aware, they communicate with each other, they communicate with you. It's a given, it's a fact. We kill to live, and other forms of life also kill us. To live, but this is just one of the cartoons that we are currently in.
Is it true that Earth is a planet with bad karma?
At this moment, quite dense ones are coming here. Spasmed particles of consciousness, passionate particles of consciousness, aggressive, non-accepting, rejecting, and at this moment in time, that's how it is. But on our Earth, there were other times when very fiery, very dynamic particles of consciousness came. There was a completely different era here, a completely different time, but honestly, what happened back then doesn't really affect us now. It doesn't make us feel warm or cold. We have what we have, and right now, what's coming here is far from an angel. And I was like that too. I had to put in a lot of effort to get out of those starting conditions and transform myself into something more. We have what we have, and it is far from an angel who comes here now. And I was like that too. I had to put in a lot of effort to get out of those starting conditions and transform myself into something more dynamic, something more accepting, more aware than it originally was.
Let's talk about karma. Karma doesn't concern thieves, murderers, and traitors in power. Is there no karma for them? Is there a mistake here? Or is karma only for people with a conscience?
Yes, no, there's no mistake here. Just the person who writes this comment has an inflated sense of self-importance. He believes that his concept is valid. He sees that his concept doesn't match reality, but he still clings to it. Who behaves like that? He believed that his concept was correct. He sees that his concept does not correspond to reality, but continues to hold on to his concept. Who behaves like that? And instead of trying to understand how things really are here, why push your ideology? A person continues to immerse themselves in illusions. Moreover, it seems this clearly frustrates him. It clearly interferes with his ability to live and enjoy life. But he holds on to his concept very tightly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's those very particles of consciousness, the immobile, shackled, repressed, and rejecting ones that gather here. I was like that too. And I was also very outraged. I resisted a lot. Then I just asked myself the question, who's right? Am I the creator? It's obvious that the creator is right. So I don't understand something. I already started to tap into extrasensory perception because neither my brain nor my senses could handle the logic of what was happening. So I saw the causes and effects, but I couldn't explain them. Why is it like that? And it was only when I got to extrasensory perception that I started to understand how energy moves through a person's body. That's when my worldview suddenly came together. You see, people think in these images. Why? Because they can't see beyond their physics. A person is not just a piece of meat. They are also a soul, a heart. These are also energy processes beyond the physical body. Cocoon, field, flow. It's all the same, actively participating in a person's life. But he doesn't see that he has a little gap, and through this crack it seems to him that it is unfair. If you remove that little gap and look around, then everything becomes absolutely logical. And those people who, in his perception, are acting incorrectly. In fact, they are acting correctly. He just doesn't see that correctness. If a person is limited solely by their own interests or those of another person, that's a very flawed worldview. Because in our world, there is an enormous amount of life. Or another person, that's a very flawed worldview. Because in our world, there is an enormous amount of life. And the balancing of all this, it actually happens through multifaceted, comprehensive interactions. The same thing. So we can now move a bit away from people to not particularly upset the sensitive ones and reach the animal level. Everything is similar. No matter what horns we climb, the fractality will be the same. In the animal world, there are animals that kill, there are animals that reproduce in huge numbers, there are animals that kill parasites, and there are animals that are parasites. This is all part of the animal world, and it is balanced. And this is that big dance. It's all part of the animal world, and it's balanced. And this is that big dance that allows consciousness to flow into matter, to flow out of matter, to enter matter, and to exit matter. In different roles, in different situations, in different forms of manifestation, gaining various experiences. That's why all this diversity exists. And the same goes for the human level. The fact that there are different types of people here, they have different positions, different tasks. They can change these positions. These particles of consciousness enter physical bodies, go through their experiences, and live them. For example, a particle of consciousness wants to experience the death of a physical body violently. So, there must be someone who will carry out this violent act. And here are two particles. One wants to die violently, while the other wants to kill violently. And reality balances all of this in space. But when this starts to happen, so that particle can really start to doubt whether it made the right choice in wanting to die violently. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. Why am I so confident in saying this? Because the first time I encountered this, it was even before my apprenticeship in the temple. That was still the case a long time ago, almost in a past life. In this life, probably, what you're saying is very strong, very long ago. When I fell out of my body, I separated my energy body from my physical body, freeing my consciousness from physics limits. The first thing that struck me was that after leaving my physical body, my value system changed instantly. Everything valuable before lost significance. Without physical body limits, I thought differently. And everything that was valuable to me before suddenly lost all significance. And being without the limitations of a physical body, I thought differently. I was striving for something else. I was striving for something else. I desired completely different aspects that weren't even implied in the future physical body. But upon returning to the physical body, when I was coming back, I was like, damn, I was just messing around with some nonsense again. Well, I had to do that. So completely different value systems. And between them, it's just a separation from physics. And so when a part of consciousness comes here, I want this, I want that. All of this is just awesome. Well, there's just so much interesting stuff here. Dives in there. It receives the limitations of physics. Perception's intent fades. Existence is limitedly perceived through the body. Here, thoughts differ. What exists is perceived very limitedly through the physical body. And here, it's a completely different flow of thoughts. Where have I ended up? What have I jumped into? Why do I need all of this? No. And that's it. The process has already begun. And again, you can draw a light, unobtrusive analogy. A person buys themselves a computer game. He wants to get a kick out of it. He wants to experience pleasure. Why do people play games? Well, because it's cool. He turns on this computer game. It frustrates him. He breaks the joystick. He breaks the keyboard. He hits the monitor. So he imagined the game like that. No, not like that, but that's what he did. So it's the expectation versus reality. And so when a particle of consciousness comes here, it has expectations that, having come here, already face reality. So yes, it can appear. This whining about how everything is bad, karma, yes, everything here is great, everything is wonderful. You just need to slightly expand your perception and see, not on a physical level. Yes, on a physical level. You won't see it, you won't realize it, it's illogical. Not on the level of your psyche. When you've piled up books, yes, piled up with some dogmas, and still your world doesn't come together, it still doesn't work. Specifically to reach the level of vidya. So right now I was talking about jnana, when you can pull something from somewhere without going through your own experience. And there is a way to obtain information. It sees when your consciousness looks directly at how everything is arranged. People who achieve vision through practices have no questions. The world is absolutely harmonious, absolutely balanced, and absolutely just, there is not the slightest doubt about it.
Then I have another question. Why is our crazy government not held accountable for the destruction of the country? For anti-people laws? That doesn't work at all. One blah blah. If it worked, they would already be on a space journey for reincarnation.
But if we look at it from the perspective of energy, then the government is a conglomerate. The vibration of the entire population of this state, conglomerate, so it's an average something that absorbs all the vibrations of each resident. Accordingly, if a certain state, a certain country populated by people vibrates in a certain way, then the ruler will be exactly the person who vibrates the same way. It's impossible to have a ruler who doesn't vibrate the same way as the population. It doesn't work that way. That doesn't happen. Accordingly, there is a phrase in the Bible, I think, that all power comes from God. Where does this phrase come from? It's not like God is sitting there and appointing a ruler. He has nothing better to do. It's more that on an energetic level, it's all quite natural. It's like in physics, like in mathematics. So on an energetic level, it's all quite natural. It's like in physics, like in mathematics. So there's a formula, and no matter what you do, it will calculate exactly that way. In general, it's all quite natural. And people who start saying such things out loud just can't fit it into their worldview. The world, there are other people on the other side who want the same thing. Are there any countries where there are also people who haven't yet come to this, haven't come into contact? There are no common borders. And there are territories all over our planet with people, absolutely, they vibrate differently, and all of this needs to be balanced. So I understand a person's outrage. But here you shouldn't fight against the system, because in that moment, you're actually fighting against God. Here, you just need to find your place in the sun and be where you feel good. And it will be good, you know? It's like coming in, for example, you go to a grocery store and they want to sell you a fur coat. And when they tell you that the fur coats are on the floor above, you say, no, I want it here. Yes, no, here it's about the fur coat. And instead of forcing the grocery store sellers to give you that fur coat, you can just go up to the next floor and at least cover yourself in those fur coats. The forms of all the options in the new collection, and it's the ability to move through space. It's also a skill, and it needs to be practiced and acquired. Here's an example, a bit detached, but very relevant. So when someone comes to me and says, listen, I understand everything perfectly. I see it all. I've even developed my extrasensory abilities, and I don't want things to happen to me like this anymore. But sometimes there are some conflict situations that, well, I can't help it. I'm still like this. I'm all tensed up again. Everything's in spasm. I see the consequences and I don't like these consequences. But for now, something inside me is exploding. I say, move your physical body however you feel so that you don't get overwhelmed. And if a person has enough ability to slightly suppress their pride and just move their physical body, from the point where the conflict is escalating to the point where there is no conflict, it all just dissipates. Like morning paper, just that. And so the ability to be mobile, the ability to be fluid, the ability to be flexible, but at the same time resilient, because if you are too flexible, you can also go too far, then you won't be able to move either. And so the ability to balance all of this within yourself suddenly brings you into a reality where everything is balanced too, and you are happy in it. But if you want to fight, if you want to battle, if you are not satisfied with the rules and order that are set by the Creator, you just need to realize that you are fighting at that moment with the Creator. The result of your effort will be obvious.
Anton, you provide knowledge and practices from ancient teachings that help people grow, improve their lives, and be healthy and happy. But some see a catch in this. Quote, "This is not a philosophy, but a practice of work of a huge number of eaters of our energy, which we, performing various practices, leading a certain way of life, and accumulating ready-made cans, figuratively speaking, which they will enthusiastically suck." What to do? I'm looking for answers. I haven't found any yet.
Start practicing the techniques that I demonstrate, because it's clear that the person who wrote the comment hasn't touched those teachings at all. To the techniques that I demonstrate. It's all very simple. There is a simple, clear, and very accessible mechanism for understanding. Where are you directing your attention? That's where your consciousness flows. If you come to a temple, sit in front of a statue, and you're told to meditate on the statue, that's absolutely right. You will be giving your consciousness to some structure, and it all depends on the kind of structure that the person who built this temple has created. If you go to a church, for example, you're told, here's an icon. Pray to it. That's absolutely right. You give your consciousness to where your attention is focused. But the person is not familiar with my practices. In my practices, we focus our attention not on me, but on yourself, meaning a completely opposite action, diametrically opposed. So I know that people initially started to worry, like, we're giving energy, and Krieger, and we're giving energy. There's some kind of tradition there. How can you give it if you're concentrating all your attention on yourself? At that moment, it's absolutely confusing for the system where everything goes, nothing goes anywhere, nothing will disappear. This is the first thing. Secondly, we inherently possess the nature of conduits. So if a person is so scared, so unconscious in their nature that they tend to shut down even more, that's immediately a step in the wrong direction. In their nature, they tend to shut down even more. That's immediately a step in the wrong direction. We channel energy through ourselves. And this energy spreads throughout the space. The energy that we channel through ourselves, it is infinite because this space is all whole. And you can't run out of energy in any way because it's all constant. This is the cycle of these processes. It's the same as a creator who creates realities, creates worlds. They are constantly flowing out, constantly giving. Each of us is a creator. We can constantly flow out, constantly give. But if we are scared, if we are tight, if the only particles that flow through us are those, we immediately invest in something, idols. It's clear that there will be a feeling that something is definitely off here. But if you invest a small amount of your energy first in yourself, you start to relax, release the spasms, get rid of the tightness, and you begin to accelerate. Energy flows through your body. You start to see how it flows from infinity to infinity. You free yourself from the constraining structures then in the form of these processes, the thought that you limited, that you will run out of energy right now, it gradually starts to fade away. When a person removes that thought, they remove from themselves that very structure that prevents the energy from flowing through the body. We have free will. If a person starts to sincerely dive into the state of feeling limited, constrained, and emptying out, their energy will say, yes, I'll do it now. So you start to feel empty. If he continues to invest his attention and consciousness in idols while feeling empty, he'll do it even faster. But if a person in an initially not so great state starts to invest in themselves, relaxes, lets go, allows energy to flow through you, then after a while such thoughts don't arise. That somewhere out there something has become smaller. On the contrary, the more you load yourself up, the more strength you have, the more resources you have. You move out of the state of agreeing that you are limited into a state where you agree that you are limitless. And your energy says, well, if you've decided to play big now, you are limitless. Please, I will flow through you and I won't run out. These things, they are indeed actually so simple, so evident. And between these evident things and everyday life, there's just a layer called practice. If a person practices, they see it. If he doesn't practice, he can really sink himself into these endless worries, endless fears, and he just remains deflated. Fears won't save you from death.
We're making a lot of videos together that are meant to improve people's lives. The same thing is done by other masters. But there's an opinion that things were better in the past. And one of the viewers writes, some conversations about the world are becoming more aggressive. They're broadcasting from every corner to raise vibrations. No one knew about it before, and people were just kind and compassionate. Is it true that people have become meaner in our time?
You know, it's actually very interesting. It's interesting because it's being asked right here and now. So in the year 2024, yes, the aggressiveness of humanity has increased quite a bit because there has been an increase in the rejection of one another because the perception has been lost. The perception specifically. It's not about believing in the teachings, but rather the perception of the wholeness, the unity of all humanity. When people can't see beyond, for example, their concepts, beyond their beliefs, beyond their home, their yard, their family. And these are all global rhythms. Global currents. So there's really no one to blame here. It's just that our nature, the space we are in, has its own rhythms. These rhythms are impersonal. They simply exist like the changing of the seasons. And right now, within this rhythm, there is a very strong darkening of consciousness. This will continue from 1 to 2 years peak. And then, after going through this peak, the rhythms will change, darkening to more relaxed states, and humanity will breathe easier. These rhythms have significant limits. An unknowing person sees around, takes a snapshot, and concludes from it that good turned bad. These rhythms always existed. These rhythms have strict time limits, observes surroundings, and judges good as bad. These rhythms have always existed, if they recall past similar rhythms. They see what's around them, take a snapshot, and based on that snapshot, they conclude that what was good has become bad. On one hand, yes, that's true, but on the other hand, these rhythms have always existed. If they dig into their memory, if they look through calendars and remember what happened during previous similar rhythms, during previous similar events, if he digs into his memory, if he looks through calendars and remembers what happened during previous similar rhythms, during previous similar events, he will see it again. All sorts of cataclysms, defaults, all kinds of things. Yes, there are some military conflicts. The peaks of these events are very clearly laid out in human history. So, on one hand, yes, but on the other hand, you're just experiencing the current peak, and then you relax, and everything gets better. And that what was better before, well, it's very easy to prove to yourself that things weren't really better back then. For example, when I think back, when I remember some place from my childhood, or music from my childhood, or food from my childhood, how delicious it was. A place from childhood, or music from childhood, or food from childhood, how delicious it was. I can go and visit that place now. I can go and listen to that childhood music. I understand what. Not so great. It's not really that special at all. This, based on the current details. At my current level of consciousness, my level of perception, it's actually quite nice. Even it's really great to live in the past, especially if you've painted it beautifully for yourself. But we live in the present. And what about living in the past? There can be a lot of problems in the future.
In your other videos, you talked about what happens to a person after death. Yes, and viewers have a logical question. They write, "I'm curious, how do you know this? No one knows what happens after death, and you speak about it so confidently. It's nicer to believe we'll reunite with loved ones than to think it's just the end. Dying is less scary if someone waits for us, who have left us, than to think that it's just the end and there's nothing after that. So it's less scary to die, thinking that someone is waiting for us there."
I agree with the person. You slowly immerse yourself in illusions, then you grow old and die. And the reality will already immerse you. Well, first of all, if we talk about reincarnation, then for some reasons like that, your close, dear, beloved ones will be waiting for you. They probably will. They will go into the next reincarnation. If we take that concept, wait, where, what is this place? Do you understand why I speak about this so confidently? Because in my life I've almost died about 3 times. But these processes were already set in motion, and it had nothing to do with practices. It was related to my idiocy. Just like that. The first time I got struck by lightning was because I was sitting under a tree during a storm. Where my head was located, there was a burned patch of the tree. I was still a child. That's where I first got acquainted with the process called dying, and I didn't like it. It was unpleasant. It was extremely cold, painful, and very sad, very scary indeed. Irreversible. Something started that you're not prepared for. It's like, while you're alive, but okay, I was just being reckless there. It was just a malfunction in the physical body due to the electric shock. Then the body somehow got going again. I was a small body, it was full of life, full of vital energy. Turned on the second time, it's even more. It was idiocy. I swam across the river even though I had only learned to swim that year. So, roughly speaking, I learned to swim at the beginning of the season. And by the middle of the season, I decided to swim across the river and ended up choking. I went underwater and I managed to avoid death, but all the processes started. And I saw tunnels and images of my parents who are actually alive and well. I saw them not in the sense that I'm going towards them, but in the sense that I'm leaving them. I saw a further series of events that I'm leaving them. I saw a further series of events, the funeral, all of that. But something inside me resisted all of that so much. That's how it was. There, I don't know, it was like a microatomic explosion inside. What about me? My body once again jolted and I continued to live in it. And that's also far away. It was an unpleasant process. And the third time, this was already when I learned to practice, when I was engaged in out-of-body experiences. That's when I started to form a much more serious worldview than in childhood, when I was just swimming across the river. And I used the practice, the technique for leaving the body. When you leave your body on the exhale, you take a deep breath. You breathe, you breathe, you breathe, and then you exhale. At that moment, you try to disconnect. Well, naturally, I took a breath, exhaled, and disconnected. I started to move through space in my dream body, in my astral body, and the processes of dying started for me. I was completely confused at first. I thought, wait, stop, I'm not dying, I just left my body. It's not the same at all, not even close, it's not even nearby. So to leave the body, it's obvious, because even animals do this. Cats, dogs, they calmly leave their bodies. No one told them that it was impossible. And children very often leave their bodies. So these are completely natural processes. There is nothing special about them, magical. But it's not death, it's not even close to death. And so being in that body, I felt it again on you, like someone is just pressing down on you. And here they apply pressure, flattening. They apply pressure, flattening. At first I was confused, then I thought, I need to get back into my body. Again, fear, again, panic. Because of this, it immediately pulls you back into your body, because just experiencing a strong emotion is enough. You fly back into the body. If I leave, you won't stray. I returned, the body wasn't breathing, it wasn't me. First of all, you won't stray far from the body, and secondly, the slightest thing goes wrong, and you're immediately thrown back in automatically. So it turned out, when I returned to the body, I saw that the body wasn't breathing, which means I was already inside. I was trying to move it, I was trying to use it, but it wasn't me. Then again, I came back to myself, but it was still. I was young, fit, and after that I had really bad headaches for a week. I am young, trained, and after that I had really bad headaches for a week. My whole body ached, meaning I left my body and my body stopped breathing, and after some time the lifeless body started to die. I felt all the charms of this dying process when you just feel like you're being smeared out. So when I finally returned and started to breathe, I managed to catch my breath somehow, but I ended up with a ton of problems. I felt the charms of this dying process, like being smeared out. When I returned and started to breathe, I caught my breath but faced many problems. It took a long time to recover. For me, death isn't beyond the horizon. And for me, death isn't something that's beyond the horizon. That's something I've felt 3 times already, due to my own foolishness. And then another practice came along. Then came the training, and there we consciously entered these states. So it was already a process. It's not just random things in life, but rather that you're sitting in meditation, doing certain actions, focusing, concentrating, trying to penetrate, and you actually penetrate into these states already by your own will. We had practices of meeting our own death by your own desire. We had practices of meeting our own death. And then I saw that in fact death is first of all individual for everyone. Secondly, it is always present on an energetic level. Thirdly, you can reach out to it, you can interact with it. The main thing is that it shouldn't take the initiative. So if you take the initiative to interact with it, it doesn't lead to anything bad. If it takes the initiative, that's the end. And all the processes have become so much at my fingertips, so clear, so tangible and palpable that it allows me to talk about it not just confidently, but also completely calmly. This is what I experience myself. And when I raise these topics with people who practiced among themselves, together with me, when I brought up these topics with people who experienced the processes of death, entering into those states, we found common ground pretty quickly. Because death is scary and painful. And the people who They are deeply deceiving themselves, hoping to figure this out at the moment it starts happening. In that moment, you can only panic, get scared, and ultimately shrink away. You end up spasming into a crystallized state of consciousness where there are no longer any possibilities for rebirth. There you can only panic, get scared, and ultimately shrink away. To spasm into a crystallized state of consciousness where there are no longer any possibilities for rebirth. Yes, you won't completely reset, you won't just disappear, but what will be left of you, you know how what remains of the physical body after cremation is ash. Yes? Technically it exists, but in reality, the difference between ash and a living person is the same here.
But they can say, well, you haven't fully died.
So, you don't really know what happens there until you meet someone. I went there in practices and saw these processes, so what's next? There is a space called the Bardo space, and it's not just in my tradition. In Buddhism, there are practices for entering the Bardo space, and the ability to penetrate there, the ability to be there, the ability to not panic in that state, to maintain your integrity of consciousness, to keep your intention, to stay focused. It's an art. That's not something you can do during death. People prepare for this. It's all the same. What can I say? Well, when I sit in the cockpit of a fighter, yes. A combat one, then I will learn. Yeah, no, you'll crash right away. It's the same here. You can't learn all of this when you start dying. This is all done well in advance. Even in those traditions like Buddhism, where everything is woven with these reincarnations, why do the monks practice and prepare for this in advance? Well, in advance they train by entering these states beforehand, dying. So it's also considered that reincarnation isn't very good, and it's better to break free from the wheel of samsara rather than spin in it endlessly. So it's not all that straightforward as one might wish. The world is much more multifaceted than just liking some idea, believing in it, and then nothing else interests me. That doesn't save you. I'm not interested in anything else. That doesn't save you.
Many people are waking up and stopping watching TV and distancing themselves from politics. And so we are being written to, you're right about TV. I haven't watched TV or listened to politics for 15 years. That's just nonsense. It's smart weaponry that still manages to scare you and control you. As long as they can control you, it means they are the winners. What do you think about that?
Thinking is harmful.
Thinking is harmful.
Yes, I have my own goals. I'm moving towards them, and I really don't care what happens around me. These topics, So, do you see what the situation is here? When a person talks about something, he tells a story. And it doesn't really matter how he tells it. About the good, about the bad, about what worries him, or about what doesn't worry him. He puts the emphasis there. So, this person is still touched by all of this. Because if something doesn't touch a person, they don't even think about it. For example, let's take the topic about that. Our universe could die. A heat death. What kind of term is that you're saying now? There is a theory, it's far from a fact that it's true, but there is such a theory, but it doesn't concern most people. And they don't say anything about it. In general, but if a person emphasizes a certain topic, I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about all the boundaries of our lives, about all the boundaries of everyday life, about all the boundaries of practical life. A huge number of topics, but the person emphasized exactly what still worries him. It's just that in his worldview, it hasn't come together yet. It didn't work out. It hasn't come together, whether it's a negative, repulsive statement or a positive statement. It's still a statement about what you're already hooked on. So, regarding politics, yeah, it doesn't matter whether you look at it or not. In general, it does have some significance to feel the climate of the space you are in, but it's very important to feel yourself in relation to this space. What do I mean? When a person lives by the principle of my house is on the edge, I don't know anything, mostly he goes with the flow. It still doesn't save him. That's such a position. When a person lives by the principle, what am I? Politicians, the state machine, the system, the corporation, all this is clear. It all takes place. It is simply a reality that we live by. But who am I in all of this? Okay, I stopped watching TV, and how did I spend my free time? What states do I put myself in? What energies do I let through me? Where am I aiming my goals? What energies do I let through me? Where am I aiming my goals? If I'm aiming for a goal, then most likely I won't be talking about politics at all. I'm going to talk about what I've been aiming for. I'm going to ask about what interests me. I'm going to explore what I want to achieve, what I want to possess, where I want to gain mastery. That's what I'm going to ask about, not about how some politicians are wrong. There's a conversation. In the Bible, Abraham is with God, and he touched upon Sodom and Gomorrah. Then Abraham asked God, "You just destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. There was so much sin, so much vice, so much depravity, but you destroyed an entire city. Surely the righteous must have suffered too." God replied, "No, there was a lot of sin, a lot of vice, a lot of depravity, but you destroyed an entire city. Surely the righteous must have suffered too." God says, "No, the righteous didn't suffer there. They weren't there." He says, "Well, at least there should be 100 righteous people. Wasn't there any?" He says, "No, there weren't any." This dialogue is about how Abraham asks God, "If there had been at least 10 righteous people, you would have spared that city, right? If I had found at least 10 righteous people, I wouldn't have touched it." And it's at this moment that I say this phrase, "Who are you in all of this?" If you're the one who just closed your doors, sitting there and feeling fulfilled because you're not looking out at the street, and television is practically the same thing, the street itself is not the most advantageous position. But what if you're the one who ignites your heart, releases their energy, becoming righteous not just in words, but in reality? These actions are not just about making noise, but about real deeds, real energetic manifestations. Then you can shift the position of an entire city. Whether you need this or not, that's a different question, but just sitting there and talking. I'll pat myself on the back for the fact that you're not watching TV, sitting there and saying, "Good job." This probably not something I'm ready to agree with. For me, what you represent, what you do, how you express yourself, and where you lead people, at least those who listen to you, is much more valuable. That's how I can express my thoughts regarding this comment. After all, what do you represent? What do you do? How do you express yourself? Where do you lead people, at least those who listen to you? This is how I can express my thoughts regarding this comment, although it didn't even contain a question.
We are all in a matrix, and we are being controlled within this matrix. And I don't know how to get out of this matrix. When we get out of it, our spirit and soul will be free. And the dark programs won't affect us. Because right now, each of us has a program written at birth. What do you think about this?
The soul, it is quite free. What can I say about this? A person needs to develop their extrasensory abilities, to look at the world not from that position, like someone told him somewhere or how this person imagined it, but still from the perspective of direct immediate perception. Then his worldview will be so strong, I added, that good and evil, black and white, all of this will turn into cartoons, into illusions. This duality, division, fragmentation, it's all what pulls us into matter. It's all that slows down our consciousness. It's all through which we lose. The mobility of one's consciousness, the spectrum of perception. And only those people who are striving for wholeness, unity, who are grasping this wholeness, who seek beauty, seek harmony, immerse their thoughts in reflections, at least on a psychological level, in reflections about the Creator, about the meaning of existence, about the causality of everything that's happening. Such people start to move not in such processes when and where to run and how to do it, and that there's nowhere to run. We already have everything. Everything is inside. And what's inside reflects outside. And there are no other principles. And so when you start to see this, when you understand the level of your responsibility and the level of your freedom, that's when it becomes very difficult to blame reality. You just start to change yourself. You start to change your energy, your form, your mobility, and suddenly, in a magical way, the space around you begins to adjust to you. But it actually doesn't adjust. It simply reflects you. And what does a person concentrate on? What he focuses on in his perception is what grows within him. If a person focuses on the dark, they will definitely encounter it. They will definitely interact with it. And he will play this game until he sees that darkness within himself. And they'll say, "Oh, it turns out I'm just like that too. Yes, there are many other aspects within me, but that's also a part of me." And only the desire for absolute, complete perception of oneself opens the path to the beyond, opens the way to where reality is not so rigid, not so principled as it is here and now, where your possibilities become much more multifaceted, much more all-encompassing than the possibilities that our physical body has, within which we are sitting. More encompassing than the possibilities that our physical body has, within which we are sitting. You can actually pull your physical body there in the form of energy and essentially be born again. That our physical body has, within which we are sitting. You can actually pull your physical body there in the form of energy and essentially be born again. To be born in a different state, in a different form, where there is no such rigid line of time, no such strict gravity, no such strict limitations of the organs of perception. It's a wonderful state, and just the fact itself. The goals of striving for these states already open the way. And if a person focuses on problems, they will be endless for him.
Speaking of the dark, there's also this comment, and for the dark ones, the scariest thing is love. And from broken hearts, it's easiest to start with the energy of suffering. For this, narcissists have been unleashed on Earth, monsters, cruel, soulless biorobots. What do you think of this perception?
I have been practicing all this time. I've never practiced with a biorobot. No matter how tense, spasmed, unconscious, or asleep a person may be, they can be awakened. You can't awaken a robot, but you can awaken a human. Given my technical background and the technical period of my life, I've interacted a lot with cybernetic systems, and there's nothing human about them. There is no life in a transistor, as it is in a person. Therefore, firstly, I cannot agree that there is a biorobot here. I haven't come across any don't exist. Yes, there are sleeping people, but they can be awakened. Another thing is, there's always the question, why wake him up? Maybe he wants to stay in this state, and the time hasn't come yet when he will want to get up. Wants to stay in this state. And the time hasn't come yet when he will want to get up. It's the same as when you're awake at 3 a.m. and everyone else is really unhappy about your being awake. The same thing can happen here. If a person wants to sleep, then you have to wake them up by force. Then there are those who pretend to be asleep. It's impossible to wake up a person who is pretending to be asleep. And why do they do that? It's the same. It's a rhetorical question. What can I comment on? There's a very interesting process. Thoughts. It's such a mental maneuver. Just imagine that our attention is like living water. And whatever you water with this living water, that is what grows. By directing your attention to the dark, to the broken hearts, that's what you cultivate around you. Direct your attention to your heart. Ignite your heart. Let love flow from it. Unconditional love, love without reason. Just love because you are alive. Love because you breathe. Love because you woke up. Love because you are a living person. In the end, enter this state, hold on to this state, allow this state to be, and you'll see how people like you will start to appear around you, not dark ones, not with broken hearts, but people like you. And some of them will awaken from your state. Just yesterday, he was also in the darkness. And then he saw you and said that he's an example to follow. He's synchronized with you, and he's already starting to grow just like you. It's not mandatory for everyone, but living this way is much more pleasant. It's much more beautiful than to water with living water. What you don't like?
Well, a viewer is writing, I was born to have a good rest, but evil demons and jinn ruin all my rest. I won't come again.
Well, sorry about that. These are the circumstances we have here right now. In our time,
Jinn intrude during moments of fear, laughter, sadness, and even when yawning. If you don't cover your mouth with the back of your left hand, they can also penetrate if a person admires himself in the mirror and exposes himself. When you enter the bathroom without a prayer, you should say, I seek refuge with Allah from the accursed devil. They can harm people if you throw something heavy or hot into the water and it hits them. Jinn are divided into different types. They even have names. There is a special jinn that incites a husband against his wife, and on the contrary, there are those that interfere with prayer, those that harm children, that make people drink alcohol, sing, dance, engage in self-indulgence, those that cause different types of addictions. But if you recite a surah every Friday, you are protected until the next Friday, and the jinn cannot harm you. Also, if you read the last 3 surahs of the Quran in the morning and evening on your palm and then rub it on yourself, that's also a strong protection. Is it true or not? Or is it just for this person?
I just had a memorable event happen a memory of a memorable event. When I was a kid, they told me that if I was a good boy, who would come on New Year's? Santa Claus, and he would bring me gifts. And he would come and bring gifts. I tried to be a good boy. And then I grew up, and some part of the fairy tale in me died because I saw more than I was supposed to. To see, in me, it died because I saw more than I was supposed to. To see, when a person moves within certain concepts, if it makes him cleaner, more beautiful, more loving, not in the sense that we're talking about sex right now, but in the sense that the love in his heart burns because of this. Yes, let there be jinn, let there be practices every Friday, please, as long as it has an effect. But if a person does it just to check a box, or doesn't do it at all, but just talks about it, what's the point of this? That's me, repeatedly. For example, I noticed priests who during Lent, they really indulged in food that wasn't allowed, that was meant to be avoided. Why did they do that? I don't know, but I just looked at it and thought, oh, what is this? Here it matters to see where all this leads. To see where all this leads. I perfectly understand that there is one religion, there are jinn. There is another religion, there are demons, evil spirits. There's a third religion, there are temptations, passions, lust, and similar words. And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter what words we use as long as it's clear. What is it about? Here, basically, I understand what it's about, but I seriously doubt that performing some very questionable action will allow a person to avoid the influence of these jinn. But at first it works. In the end, he worked for me when I was a good boy so that Santa Claus would come to me and give me presents. Questionable actions are still actions. When you have to rub something with your hands, and that's supposed to help, that's what I'm talking about.
Isn't this some kind of ritual that supposedly helps?
If it helps, then thank God it helps. But my life experience shows that this is not enough. For a person to change, that's too little. To resist temptations, it's too little to be able to control and balance your passions. I also know a lot about all sorts of things. With hand movements, what's the point of this? No, that's not enough.
In 2024, 2025, and 2026, incredibly strong solar activity is expected, which, according to various forecasts, could significantly reduce the Earth's population. Many people were struck by the information about this period, they raised it in an interview with Ilya Radzevich, and here's what people wrote. Don't try to survive in 2025. Stock up on coffins. In the future, in the final year, the living will envy the dead.
And I'll say you will be like children and you'll be saved. You see, again, whatever a person focuses their attention on will grow in their life. But if he focuses his attention on Armageddon, he will get that Armageddon. God is merciful. He gives what a person wants. A person doesn't always realize what they're creating. There's a saying, right? Beware of your wishes. I've seen a lot of energy. Processes that slow down the power and potential of a person when he generates the power and potential of a person when he generates, well, some nonsense, just for himself. His energy acts separately from him and is just being suppressed. It doesn't allow him to be heard. There's a difference between when a person says something out loud and their reality hearing it. For that, you need potential, you need mobility, you need fire. There are times when a person says something out loud and that's it. It's just at the level of noise. In other words, his reality doesn't perceive it at the level of noise. In other words, his reality doesn't perceive it. If a person generates their quick demise, and that's exactly what he does, then his energy can constantly keep him at a very low energetic level, not allowing him to be heard by reality. When you state something with a burning heart, sincerely, and if he does, his energy can constantly keep him at a very low energy level, preventing him from being heard by reality. When you state something with a burning heart, sincerely, desirously, purposefully, your energy will help you. She will make it so that everything is set in motion. Those who are aware of you will hear you, and you'll start moving towards the realization of your intention. And there can be a completely opposite process when everything will resist, so that, God forbid, no one hears you. Because we are physics, we are psychology, we are energy, and all these components of us want to live. All these components of us won't just let you generate like that. That Armageddon is coming, that everything is bad, that now the dead and the living will envy the dead. This is a disaster. Why generate this Why cultivate this? Meanwhile, events will still take place. They're already happening right now. Some time has already passed since my interview with Ilya. And sometimes you check the news, and I think I was something, even a slightly better opinion about the upcoming events. They are getting worse and worse. But the very fact of the event doesn't imply that you'll become a participant. Whether you do or not depends on what you generate, what you strive for, that you'll become a participant in it. Whether you become a participant or not depends on what you generate, what you strive for. It's no secret that even during World War II, there were people who felt very comfortable, and it hardly affected them at all. And there were people whose entire lives just fell apart, and it hardly affected them at all. And there were people whose entire lives just fell apart. Why is it that at the same moment in time on the same planet, everything is great for someone? And for someone, it's a disaster. Here, I'm showing you through extrasensory perception, through practices. That's why, and the men, by practicing exercises, honing these practices, developing their skills, and opening themselves up to see and perceive energy, they realize why it is this way. It becomes obvious to him, and then the question is just a small one. Just move to where it won't touch you. And the fact that it will happen, it will happen. There's no doubt about it, because it's already happening. What are you doubting about what's already happening? And there was another flare on the sun recently. I even posted this news on my Telegram channel, just so that people can observe, become aware, and after experiencing this day consciously, do they even understand what they represent today? What are the capabilities of the capillary system? What are the capabilities of the energy system? There are people who suddenly feel very unwell, but they don't understand what's happening. But there are people who don't even notice this process. And those who don't notice it, everything is more or less fine for them. They can miss a lot more. And those who are affected by the solar flare, they immediately start feeling unwell. I guess I really need to start training myself urgently, changing, transforming, and restoring, because it will only get worse in this regard. The load will increase. This is one flare. It has passed, but there will be more of them.
It turns out that if you don't feel it, then you are, so to speak, more.
At this level, everything is fine for you, but the seriousness of the situation will worsen. Yes, that's clear. That's why I'm providing some self-control points, points of awareness, where people have the opportunity not just to flow from day to day, but to periodically become aware, awaken, and look at what I represent in relation to everything that's happening, what I'm generating, who I am. And I've already mentioned that if a person is truly worthy in the face of reality, then reality will protect them to the very end. Nothing will happen to them. And I've already said that if a person is truly worthy in the face of reality, then reality will protect them to the very end. Nothing will happen to them. Even if the whole world is just burning in flames, nothing will happen to them. Even if the whole world is just burning in flames. And these processes are also described in ancient books, as well as in not so ancient books. These processes are described in various religions. It's just that, again, some people use the word sinless, while others use the word righteous. I use the term practitioner with a burning heart.
We had the northern lights in the south over the weekend. At home, the dogs fought each other almost to death and scared the cat. Suddenly, the Repsolidopsis bloomed, and the rats moved from the cage behind the microwave. Is this the apocalypse?
No, it's just a high-level solar flare. What causes the northern lights? Because the sun emits a powerful energy pulse, a plasma ejection directed towards our planet. And the consequences of this ejection are already the northern lights. And accordingly, the animal world, including humans, and even sensitive equipment, all react to this. And these flares will intensify their quantity, their density. The occurrence will increase, and accordingly, if there's such a strong reaction to a single flare like that, what will happen when the density of these events increases? Here to this, it's possible and necessary to prepare. We need to keep this in our minds. But this will pass, and everything will be fine again. The main thing to get through this period harmoniously, calmly, and without losses. And to do this, you need to take care of yourself, your physical health, your mental well-being, and your energy. Take care not just in words, but in action, so that your physical health is in order, your capillary system, your lymphatic system, and so that your mental state is stable, strong, and so that your energy flows and burns, so that it is not in any way constricted, spasmed.
And if you feel like sleeping all day, what does that mean? Because some of our commentators write that if there is such a constant decline in energy, then Someone is stealing this life energy. Someone is stealing it from us.
That means you need to start practicing, and you need to do it urgently. You should have started practicing yesterday. This is what it means. A decline in energy is all a result of constricting structures. Where did they come from? Yes, there are 100,000 million reasons why they appear. And if we focus on why they appeared, we will lose a lion's share of time. So you need to start working on yourself right away. That is to understand the mechanism by which this constricting structure forms and the mechanism by which we relax it. When a person becomes aware of this mechanism, they see and feel it within themselves, as obvious as sticking a pin into their hand. That's when they no longer question why. They simply pay attention to themselves throughout the day. At some point, they notice how they start to constrict themselves. He just pays attention to himself throughout the day. And at some point in their life, they notice how they start to constrict themselves, speaks, oh, why am I reacting like this? Why am I doing this? Why am I killing myself right now? Something upset him. Why am I killing myself right now? Yes, some event happened that is irritating him. Yes, something happened that he gives some exaggerated importance to. But he sees where this leads. It's much easier for him to let go of all this. To slip out from under these reactions, he needs to see all of this. And if a person doesn't see all of this, then it's going to be very hard to hit the mark just by pointing a finger in the air. Causality. So let's analyze this. Your house is on fire and you're analyzing something, getting ready. We need to put it out already. Let's analyze, let's think, let's search for this. No. Practice extrasensory perception to perceive your energy and solve the problem. You need to train yourself to see and perceive your own energy. And by doing that, you can solve this problem. A person will just see how they are driving themselves to that point, to the point where they'll stop doing this, and that's it. You know, it's like this. A person with their eyes closed starts asking, how do I run through the forest? Yeah, there's no way you can run through the forest with your eyes closed. The most you can do is walk, and that's very slowly. With your hands out in front, then you at least have a chance to get through it after a long time. And what if you just take those hands, instead of putting your hands out in front, you take off the blindfold from your eyes. Run as fast as you can. That's it. There are no problems. So I suggest taking your hands and removing the blindfold from your radar perceptions. They're feeling around by touch, but where, what caused it? How did it happen? These are all practices. This is everything that I show, tell, and teach.
Do you want to unlock your inner strength and learn to manage energy? The course, Power of Consciousness 1. Practical energy will provide you with tools to improve health, develop intuition, and gain a deeper understanding of the world. Join and start changing your life right now. Link in the description.